Let me ask you something. Have you ever Googled how to manage my money better and ended up on some article that told you to max out your 401k, diversify your portfolio across multiple asset classes, and make sure your emergency fund covers 6 months of expenses? And you're sitting there thinking, I don't even have $6 left after rent. It's like going to a doctor because your leg hurts, and the doctor says, great news. If you just run 5 miles a day, eat organic, and get a personal trainer, you'll be perfectly healthy. Thanks. Very helpful. Here's the thing nobody in the finance world wants to say out loud. Most financial advice isn't broken. It's just not written for you. It's written for someone who already has a solid foundation, someone who already cleared the first 3 levels of the money game. And if you're still on level 1, that advice doesn't just feel useless. It can actually make things worse. Let's talk about why. Imagine 2 people, both 27 years old. Both want to get their finances in order. The first person, let's call him Marcus, earns $95,000 a year. He has some savings, no high-interest debt, and a stable job with benefits. He reads a personal finance article that tells him to invest 15% of his income, build an emergency fund, and start a Roth IRA. Marcus follows the advice. 6 years later, he has a growing investment account and a comfortable cushion. The second person, let's call her Nina, earns $34,000 a year. She has $2,400 in credit card debt at 24% interest, rent that eats 45% of her paycheck, and no savings. She reads the exact same article. She tries to invest 15% of her income. 3 weeks later, she can't pay a bill. She pulls the money back out. She feels like a failure. She stops trying altogether. Same advice. 2 completely different outcomes. And here's what's painful about this. Nina didn't fail because she lacked discipline. She failed because she was handed a map to a destination she wasn't standing near yet. The personal finance industry produces an enormous amount of content every single year. Books, podcasts, YouTube channels, articles, courses. And almost all of it operates from one invisible assumption, that the reader or viewer already has some financial breathing room. Breathing room to invest. Breathing room to wait. Breathing room to make a mistake and recover. For the people who have that room, the advice is genuinely good. For the people who don't, it can feel like being handed a recipe that starts with, first, preheat your oven when you don't own a kitchen. So how did we get here? Why is the system built this way? The answer starts with where financial advice comes from in the first place. Think about the people who write personal finance books. Most of them are either successful investors, former finance professionals, or people who went through a financial struggle, fixed it, and are now sharing what worked for them. Here's the quiet problem with that last group. By the time they're writing the book, they've already crossed to the other side. They remember what it felt like to be broke, but they're writing from a place of stability. The advice they give reflects the tools that worked once they had some traction, not the tools that helped them get traction to begin with. It's like asking someone how they climbed a mountain and they tell you all about the gear they used near the summit. Beautiful advice. Completely useless if you're still trying to find the trailhead. Now add the financial services industry to the mix. Banks, investment platforms, insurance companies, credit card companies. They all produce a tremendous amount of educational content. But here's a question worth asking. Who are these companies most interested in educating? Their most profitable customers are people with disposable income. People who will open investment accounts, take out mortgages, buy insurance packages. So the content they produce naturally orbits around the problems those customers have. When did you last see a major bank publish a guide called How to Survive the Month When Your Income Doesn't Cover Your Expenses? That content doesn't get made because the people who need it most aren't the most valuable customers to reach. This isn't some grand conspiracy. It's just the invisible gravity of financial incentives shaping what gets written, funded, and promoted. And then there's one more layer to this. There's a concept in psychology called the curse of knowledge. It basically means that once you understand something deeply, It becomes almost impossible to remember what it felt like, not to understand it. Experts lose the ability to see through a beginner's eyes. Most personal finance educators have been thinking about money in sophisticated ways for so long that phrases like, just invest in low-cost index funds, feel obvious and simple to them. To someone who has never invested before, has no idea how a brokerage account works, and is afraid of losing the little money they have, that phrase is not simple at all. It's a door with no handle. Here's the insight that changes how you look at all of this. Money advice has invisible prerequisites. Every piece of financial advice you've ever read or heard assumes you've already completed a list of steps that nobody told you about. The list goes something like this. You have stable income. You have housing security. You have no debt that's charging you more than your investments could ever return. You have a basic understanding of how financial accounts work. You have time and mental energy to think about long-term planning. If you have all of those things, the mainstream advice works beautifully. Invest consistently. Use tax-advantaged accounts. Let compounding do its job. Don't panic sell. Be patient. But if you're missing even one item on that invisible list, the advice doesn't just underperform. It can push you backwards. Here's a concrete example of what that looks like. Someone with a credit card charging 22% interest reads that they should start investing. So they put $100 a month into an index fund expecting to earn maybe 8 or 9% a year. Meanwhile, the debt they didn't pay down is growing at 22%. They're essentially earning 8 to lose 22. The math is silently destroying them while they feel productive for investing. The advice to invest isn't wrong. The prerequisite they were never told about is clear high-interest debt first, because no investment reliably beats 20% guaranteed returns. Or take the advice to build a 6-month emergency fund. Solid advice. But if your current income barely covers your current expenses, building a 6-month fund could take 3 or 4 years of extreme sacrifice. The psychological weight of that timeline alone makes people give up entirely. The advice needed a different version for a different starting point. This is what we mean when we say the advice is designed for people who already have money. Not that it's malicious. Not that the people giving it are bad. Just that it assumes a starting line most people haven't reached yet. And when people who haven't reached that starting line try to follow advice designed for people who have, they don't just fail to get results. They often conclude that the problem is them, that they're bad with money, that they lack discipline or intelligence, that wealth building simply isn't for someone in their position. That conclusion is one of the most expensive lies a person can believe about themselves. So what do you actually do with this? First, stop measuring your financial progress against advice that wasn't written for where you are. Before you follow any financial guidance, ask one question. What does this advice assume I already have? Does it assume I have no high-interest debt? Does it assume I have a stable income? Does it assume I have money left over after my essential expenses? If the advice assumes things you don't yet have, it doesn't mean you'll never use that advice. It means it's not your Chapter 1. It's Chapter 4. Your Chapter 1 looks different. Chapter 1 is about stopping the bleeding before you start building. That means if you have debt charging you 18% or more, the highest return financial move you can make right now is paying that down. Not investing. Not saving aggressively. Eliminating the drain. Chapter 1 means building a tiny emergency buffer. Not 6 months. A starter cushion of $500 to $1,000. Something that keeps one unexpected expense from sending everything back to zero. It's not glamorous. The finance world doesn't make YouTube videos about saving your first $500. But that $500 is the difference between staying in the game and being knocked out of it every time something goes wrong. Chapter 1 means understanding where your money actually goes before trying to optimize it. Most people are genuinely surprised when they track spending for the first time. Not because they're reckless, but because small, consistent spending is psychologically invisible. You don't feel the $340 a month you're spending on things you barely use. You feel the single big purchase you made. And Chapter 1 means being honest about your income ceiling. If the real problem is that your income genuinely doesn't cover your basic needs, no matter how optimized your spending is, then budgeting harder is not the answer. Finding ways to increase income, even slowly, even imperfectly, is the move that changes the math. None of this is exciting. None of it will get 1,000,000 views on YouTube. But it's the unsexy groundwork that makes everything else in personal finance actually functional for real people living real lives. Second, filter your financial content intake. Start paying attention to who the creator is talking to. When someone says, just automate your investments every month, ask yourself, are they talking to someone in your situation or someone 5 years ahead of you? Both types of content are valuable, but they're valuable at different times. Look for educators who acknowledge the prerequisites, who say things like, this assumes you've already handled X, who build advice in layers rather than delivering the same message to everyone. Here's what I want you to walk away thinking about. The personal finance world has a visibility problem. The people who most need financial guidance are also the people that the mainstream financial content machine is least designed to reach. And when they try to follow advice built for someone further ahead, they often end up feeling like they're the problem. You are not the problem. The map was just drawn for someone starting from a different place. Every person who has ever built real financial stability started from their actual position, not from where the advice assumed they were. They figured out the prerequisites, completed them one by one, and then the mainstream advice started actually working because they finally had the foundation it was quietly built on. The game isn't rigged against you, but it wasn't designed with you in mind either. And knowing the difference between those two things is worth more than most financial advice you'll ever read. Start from where you are, not from where the article assumes you are. That's the whole lesson.